In this lesson, we'll be taking a look at the MIB turbulence texture node. So the turbulence texture, just like most of our other textures, are going to be found just down here inside the textures tab. And if we take a look inside that, we should find down toward the bottom the texture turbulence. Alright, now like a lot of these other mental rate textures, this node won't be able to work by itself. We'll actually need to find some kind of coordinates for it to be able to work. So in order to do this, let's use the texture vector, and we'll take this turbulence node, middle click, and drag this up into the coordinates. And now you'll be able to see that our turbulence node behaves correctly. So really we just have a few of these different attributes to be able to talk about. So the spacing, you can see, really just kind of controls the distance between these different iterations. So you can see as the spacing starts to increase, we start to get more and more of these different lines in our turbulence result. Now the strength is really defining the overall intensity of this turbulence that we're actually seeing here. So you'll notice that as the strength starts to drop to a very low value, how we get very, very little turbulence in here. Now you will notice that if we were to set this to a value of 1, this is the result that we get. Now you'll see that as we start to lower this to a lower value, it will allow us to do that. But once we hit a value of 0, you do want to be careful, because as soon as it hits a value of 0, it will automatically default to a value of 1. So you'll see a value of 0 and a value of 1 look identical. So the same applies to a lot of these other values. If they're set to a value of 0, then the renderer will automatically use a value of 1 at render time. So you can see with a higher strength, we get a much stronger turbulence effect, and we can actually overdrive a lot of these values. So if we really wanted to increase the amount of turbulence that we see, we do have that capability. Now the power is actually sort of tied in with this strength. So this will be a little bit more apparent if I lower the strength just a little bit more. With this, what we can start to do is increase this to a particular power. So right now this is raised to the power of 2. If I wanted to increase this, I could now raise this to the power of 5, and the power of 10, and so on. So with a higher amount of power, this is able to really kind of soften out and smooth this turbulence result. As our power level starts to decrease, you can see that we start to now get a much more jittery, sort of noisy effect. And again, just like with the strength, if the power is set to a value of 0, then it will automatically default to a value of 1. So again, value of 0 and a value of 1 look identical. And iteration, this is really sort of controlling the number of passes that this turbulence node will go through. So you can see with an iteration of 0, really we have no additional turbulence passes that are happening. With this set to a value of 1, 2, and 3, you'll see as it starts to increase that we start to get a much more noisy effect. And so this really just kind of helps us to act as a multiplier and really start to strengthen up this turbulence result with very little effort. Now the polar, depending on which value we choose, can also just sort of change the overall pattern of this turbulence result. So once we're ready to use this, we can take this turbulence, middle click, and connect it into our shader. In our case, we'll use the diffuse, and you'll notice that whenever we try to connect this turbulence node, that it will pop up the attribute, or rather the connection editor. So all we have to do is take the out value, and you'll notice that whenever we select the out value, we don't have the ability to connect it right into the diffuse. It's actually grayed out. So what we'll have to do is expand this and manually connect it to the red, green, and blue channels. Alright, now once this is connected, you'll see that this, instead of being red, is actually going to render as a black and white image. And so that's what we get. Now in the lesson where we talk about the MIB color interpolate, we'll talk about how we can actually take this turbulence result and start to give it a little bit of color as opposed to this black and white result that we have currently. So that's a look at how we can use this MIB texture turbulence.